Good morning, students. This is Dr. Faith Acker from Northern Virginia Community College. I'm recording this video this morning because we aren't having class today on the 15th of November due to inclement weather. Today in class we would have gone over ways to make a works cited list for multiple works by different authors within the same volume. In our case, we're talking about the Norton Introduction to Literature edited by Kelly J. Mays, which is our course textbook for this course. Most of the texts you'll be citing in your theme and context essay will be from this book, and there's a much shorter and easier way to cite multiple works by different authors from the same larger anthology. So I'm about to pull up on the left, a copy of our class syllabus. I'm going to be going back to the 13th of November when you had 3 assigned readings. You all will have read Jennifer Egan's work, Black Box, a short story. You will have read Coming Soon, which we're not going to deal with because it's very short. You will have read David Sedaris's short story, Jesus Shaves, and Margaret Atwood's Lusus Naturae. All of those texts are found in the Norton Introduction to Literature, edited by Kelly J. Mays, the shorter 12th edition, and they're on the page numbers indicated in my syllabus. So on the right side of the screen, I've given you the works cited entry that I would normally give for Jennifer Egan's Black Box. As with any works cited entry, it starts with the author's name, last name first. Then it's followed by the title of the work. In this case, Black Box is a fairly short work, so we've put it in quotation marks. This is followed by the container. In this case, Black Box, the short story, is contained within the Norton Introduction to Literature, which is a much larger volume, about a 2,000-page anthology. That has another contributor, if you're looking at the MLA list of things to include, and that contributor is the volume's overarching editor, Kelly J. Mays. In particular, we're using the shorter 12th edition, which is important for the page numbers, published by W.W. Norton and Company. My version is published in 2016. You may have one that's published in 2017, so check on the back of your title page. In this volume, the short story appears on pages 193 through 216. Now, in your theme and context essay, you have to use 8 different sources from your commonplace book. And instead of citing your commonplace book, you're going to be citing those sources as they appear in the Norton Introduction to Literature, largely because that's a much easier citation. However, if you have to write 8 separate entries from the Norton, all in the same list, that's going to make your works cited entry much longer than it needs to be, and it could end up getting very confusing because you'll have some very repetitive information. So Norton, in its joy and wisdom, has come up with a much easier way to cite works the MLA has come up with a way to cite works much more simply when you have multiple works within the same volume. It basically works like cross-referencing. We're going to write one entry for the Norton Introduction to Literature, and then a lot of entries that indicate that they come from that one larger work. You will only use this if you're using multiple entries within the same volume. So in this case, if you were only citing Jennifer Egan's Black Box story, you would use this works cited entry that I have at the top of my list. Once you add a second entry, you'll want to switch to the cross-referencing system because it will save you a lot of time and typing. So I've already pre-written on my screen the entry for the Norton Introduction to Literature if we were citing the whole book. And you'll remember this citation from back earlier when you were writing your bibliography papers. When you cited the author's biographies in the book, you used Kelly Mays as the author. You used the author's name as the title because you had a short biographical sketch with its own title, the author's name, and then the rest of this will have looked pretty similar, except that you will have had the page numbers at the end. In this case, we're going to give Jennifer Egan her own particular works cited entry. She gets to be here as a work called Black Box, and we're going to tell our readers that this is in a work listed under Mays in our same bibliography. In order to cross-reference Jennifer Egan's entry, which appears in Mays, we have to have this larger entry for the entire Norton Introduction to Literature. I can't just put Mays in here without giving any other information, because if I put Mays here and I don't tell you somewhere else in my works cited that I'm referring to Mays's edition of the Norton Introduction to Literature, you might have to look through every work written or edited by anybody whose last name was Mays in order to find the short story Black Box. That sounds like an awful lot of work for your reader if your reader wants to read Jennifer Egan's story. So in order to make sure that our reader knows exactly what Mays means, once we've written Jennifer Egan Black Box, noted that it's in the volume called Mays and it's on pages 193 to 216, we add back in this reference just to the Norton. We list it under Mays because it's a cross-referencing system. Here, Jennifer Egan's entry says Mays. Here, the entry for the Norton Introduction to Literature starts with the word Mays. This means that every time we list any work from the Norton Introduction to Literature, we're going to include the word Mays and then the page numbers within the volume. In each instance, this is going to link back to the cross-reference to Mays's larger volume that I've already noted and included. So, on the 13th of November, we read Black Box. It's in Mays. That's Kelly J. Mays's Norton Introduction to Literature, the shorter 12th edition, 2016, on pages 193 to 216. The same day, we read Jesus Shaves by David Sedaris, also in Mays. Again, your reader, if they wanted to find out what Mays is going to look for Mays in your works cited entry and then find that that's the Norton Introduction to Literature. We read Margaret Atwood's Lusus Naturae. Again, it cross-references back to this entry. And we read Arthur Miller's, we didn't read that for the same day, but on another day we read Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. I've included that here because Death of a Salesman is a long work. So if you're citing Antigone or Death of a Salesman or A Midsummer Night's Dream, you'll want to put those titles in italics rather than quotation marks to indicate that they are physically longer works. They are multiple, more than probably 40 pages each. I didn't check that exactly, but you can see right here that Death of a Salesman in our Norton is 66 pages long. So I have 5 entries to my, and 4 of them are stories, and 1 of them is the book that all those stories are contained within. Anytime I have more than 2 works, so even if I only had Jennifer Egan and David Sedaris, anytime I have more than 2 works from the same anthology, I can use this citation style so that I don't end up with 8 different entries that all look like this, with the author, the title, and the pages swapped out. That ends up looking very tedious, and it makes your works cited entry a lot longer. I think the one we have is much nicer. So this is how our works cited page would look at the moment. We have the Norton Introduction to Literature, and we have a lot of works that come within it. You will probably also have 2 articles in your works cited page, and if you happen to cite a piece of literature that isn't from our Norton, you'll have to cite that separately and link to the book or the website from which you found that text. The last thing I would recommend doing, and Word is great because it will do this for you, is I would alphabetize your works cited list. Imagine if, instead of just citing 4 or 8 texts from the Norton, you cited every single one. There are hundreds of texts in the Norton. You would want your reader to be able to find that Mays entry to see what everything was in as quickly as possible. So in MLA, we always alphabetize, and in Microsoft Word, there's a convenient button. I like to call it the A to Z button. And it usually appears at the top of your screen. In mine, I have to make my screen a little wider, but then it looks right here at A to Z. If you click Sort and you sort by paragraphs ascending, it will automatically alphabetize all of the entries in your works cited page. So now you can see that Margaret Atwood, because her last name starts with A, comes first, and it goes on down the list. Kelly Mays is in the middle. That's a good place for her to be, even though she's the work that most of these are contained within, because since we're referencing all of these other ones as coming from Mays, you want your reader to be able to look on your list alphabetically for the letter M, the first letter of the entry for the work that all of them are contained within, as easily as possible. So this, my fine students, is how to cross-reference multiple works in an anthology so that you have to contain slightly less information in each individual works entry and list all of them under one larger container entry. I hope this is helpful, and if it is not, please feel free to email me with any questions. Thanks very much.